Warning: the following audio drama contains adult themes and scenes of intense violence. Listener discretion is advised. Previously.
Why can you not remember that I am not my father?
You are a leaf off the same branch he came.
I may have blossomed from the same root, but I do not have to sway in the wind as he did.
It could never be the same. Elohim was looking for his father. The circumstances are completely different.
Circumstances, yes, but the darkness of society and those that killed him, the memories and feelings of which I carry, they still grow like thorns in the briars.
We were making do to catch up to them to keep them from crossing the channel. But he convinced us not to.
Who?
A stranger who had come into town. 2 weeks earlier. He was the reason the English left.
Do you also have you commune with the beasts and the trees and the dead?
To the young souls of the Western School, we leave you.
You are my dearest friend.
You can't let go of having been a Roman soldier, can you?
It still serves. Hopefully you've learned how to accept defeat gracefully.
Oh, Sam. Beyond these walls, he refuses to travel, you know that.
You know my services to our brethren, in which case my soul goes with them when they embark on their sacred journey. That is when I leave these walls.
You just don't like to get dirty.
What do you want?
Every knee shall bow.
They're dead! So many, all dead.
Sam, what's happening?
Aaron, the Western School.
Eye of the Beholders. Episode 2. A Blind Gamble. The shock surrounding the untold deaths at the Western School never dissipated from the brethren in the Alps. Instead, it moved everyone into trying to find answers. How? Why? Within minutes, the master guides were already searching, seated in deep meditation to cross the chasm of time and space, to connect with those members who were now no longer in their physical bodies. Before the hour had passed, the 7 leaders had convened with the entirety of the school in one of the outer courtyards. Bright torches lit the expanse as they stood upon a raised platform to inform the audience of their findings. The head master guide, Wimarc, took to the fore. Her dark black skin was a beautiful contrast to the sheer satiny whiteness of her role's dress. Behind her, the other masters flanked, each wearing the colors of their station. One red, another orange, another yellow, then green, blue, and the last purple. The audience watched, their stares begging for what they had already uncovered.
The souls of those that perished have told us. The attackers came in the obsidian of night's darkness. For weeks, there were stirrings upon the breezes, but they could not determine the source nor the intent. Many died fighting. Others, for some reason, took their own lives.
Master Guide Gundlach stepped beside her. His red robe glowed a rich crimson in the brightness of the torches.
The air is still very heavy. Our own emotions are clouding our ability to make a deeper blend with their spirit minds.
We will all learn more once we traverse our emotional veils. Know this: our loved ones, our brethren from the Western School, who have this midnight transitioned from this earth, now exist in the bright white sun of the universal Creator. They are still bonded to us through the timeless realms of eternity. They have not disappeared from our lives.
Aaron listened, transfixed, stunned, distressed. Over the following days, the school moved into high gear to uncover the mystery. While many went into various meditative states in order to pierce the realms of the unseen, Aaron, along with several dozen others, released scouting birds to fan out across the continent and gain direct visual sight of the Western School and its populace. The birds' flight took several days. Nevertheless, each handler sat in meditative position along an upper gantry wall. They remained clothed in heavy fur, warmed by small bonfires perched alongside the perimeter of the stone fence. Their eyes were closed and minds absent from the flesh. Instead, they were blended with the consciousness of their flying companions. Once the birds arrived at the western compound, their handlers in the Alps could see the high rocky cliffs along the Spanish Atlantic coast where the school had burrowed and hidden its monastery. Columns of smoke billowed out from the high caves overlooking the beaches, lying several hundred feet below. Gliding overland, charred fields of debris littered the emerald grass slopes that fell away from the cliff edges. Amidst several of the scattered and burnt belongings were the unmistakable bodies of slain Muein disciples. Samantha gently knelt before Aaron as he was still seated with eyes closed in meditation. His beard stubble now shadowed his face. He hadn't left this position for 4 days. Her presence suddenly brought him back. Her eyes were piercing, a message suggesting that something important had been discovered. Samantha led Aaron into the catacombs of the personal chambers, bringing him to the compartment of her parents, Wimarc and Golda. When they entered, Golda was seated in deep meditation on the floor, her eyes closed. Wimarc met them as soon as they entered.
It is only a glimpse, but your mother is alive. We don't know about Matthew.
The blend is strong.
It comes in and out. Still too much emotion.
Everyone surrounded Golda, waiting, begging for more information. Golda stretched her awareness to return a portion of it to the room to announce what she was finding.
Darkness. She's in hiding.
Where?
Still inside the grounds.
What part? If we could know.
She's having a hard time getting it through.
Tell her Thea is near. Tell her to give it to her.
I'm trying, but the link is weak. She will call out for her. Wait!
Golda's eyes suddenly burst open, the link broken. Wimarc caught her as the breach slammed her back to the moment.
I have you.
Something startled her.
Everyone looked panicked. Had Rachel been discovered? Will she survive? Aaron raced down the granite hallway of the Muein Master Guide's temple. The 7 superiors were sitting in deep meditation behind an ornately carved and decorated wooden fence-like barrier when he found them. An attendant guard intercepted him, keeping him behind the palisade.
Apologies, Matrostrum, but they are not seeing anyone, considering the circumstances.
We have made blend with a survivor.
It was this sudden news that broke the Master's meditative reconnaissance. They knew other members besides themselves were also reaching out to the Western Branch, and, due to the strength of individual bonds, could possibly connect in a more unique fashion than themselves. Master Ishrak took it upon herself to hear what Aaron had to report about his mother. She let him explain what Golda had seen as she had led him back down the hall and outside, to let the freshness of the air calm the turbulence of their spirits. Naturally, Aaron had pleaded to send a rescue party, knowing that if Rachel had survived, there could still be other brethren, along with the possibility that the danger had still not yet subsided.
You know we feel as passionately as you. But until we can ascertain how the invaders were able to do this, none of us may be safe. We have blended with the other masters from our remaining schools, north and south, and agree that, as of now, no member is to leave the compounds, nor are those already on the outside currently allowed to return.
She placed a hand on Aaron's shoulder, hoping to comfort him.
As a guardian, you know the virtue of patience.
Yes, Master.
Ishrak bowed to him, then looked deeply into his eyes. It was clear she felt his pain viscerally, as it seemed a thin welling of tears brimmed the outline of her pupils, though her inner strength kept them from overflowing onto her cheeks. She turned back inside, leaving him with only the ability of remote observation and keeping his physical body being chained to the temple's walls like one of his library books. The frustration burned every fiber of Aaron's body. It was so much that he could no longer settle into a meditative state. He returned to his private compartment and paced back and forth within the small room. His mind raced, his consciousness billowing and twisting within like a whirlwind. He suddenly stopped, a decision made. Moving now with assured purpose, he reached into a closet carved into the wall and yanked an outfit of winter furs. A short time later, Aaron emerged from a small cave, carrying a torch and climbing over large boulders positioned in front of the aperture. Though he was dressed in the thickness of the furs, it seemed he was well versed in how to maneuver despite their density, as well as the darkness of night. Once he clambered over the summit of the final boulder, he threw his torch top down, allowing it to be extinguished in the landscape of the snow. He positioned his knapsack over his chest, then paused while his eyes adjusted to the pale glow of the white hillside. He slithered around the rocky outcrop, occasionally looking up and around, making sure he wasn't being seen. He turned a corner. A pair of gloved hands shoved him against the rock. In the next second, warm lips pressed against his. It was Samantha, also dressed in fur.
I think you could use the help of a Roman soldier right about now.
Yes, I could. But Sam...
Wimarc stepped out of the shadows, also warmly dressed, and guiding a trio of packed goats.
But nothing. I helped bring your mother back here after your other self's death. I will do it again.
What about Golda?
She's willing to remain behind as our link.
And hopefully keep us from being permanently expelled.
Wimarc offered a goat to each of them.
We travel only at night, even once we reach the valley forests, until we come to the first village. Then we head overland.
6 to 7 weeks.
As quickly as we can. And we will work to reconnect with Rachel on the way.
And you can tune in to Thea as well.
And Matthew?
Still nothing. It seems your mother doesn't know.
Aaron took hold of the walking rein of his goat, appearing quite grateful at Samantha. She looked at him with compassion, feeling the rawness of his emotions and knowing the drive that was coming with them.
Thank you.
Samantha nodded. Then along with Wimarc, the trio cantered down the snowy slope. They leaned over the goats, holding their hands on the beasts' necks, connected to them as one, seeing what they saw, but also offering direction for where they wished to head. As the light of dawn blossomed, they hid inside a crevasse, shielded from sight. Throughout the whole of day, they sat in meditation, trying to reach out to Rachel, to anyone of the Western school. They took turns between sleeping and spiritually searching. Beside them, the goats remained nestled in a deep slumber. Only after the curtain of night had fallen did they resume the trek, without torchlight, with only the guidance of their senses combined with those of the goats. Fortunately, with a few hours before dawn's arrival, they were able to make it into the forest at the base of the mountains. They cautiously meandered through the trees and bushes, keeping senses on high alert. Aaron especially. This was the first time he had ever been in the world beyond the monastery's fortress-like walls, though he did come with an uncanny sense of familiarity and occasional flashbacks. These remembrances were like an invasion within his soul, from what Elowan had experienced when he descended during the time of the Great Mortality. It made Aaron want to jump out of his skin. Confident that the route to and from the mystery school was safe, Wimarc led them out of the forest and into the light of the coming day. They stopped briefly in a secluded area to rid themselves of their furs and get dressed in what would be considered normal attire. Tunics, trousers, a dress for Samantha, leggings, low-cut flat leather shoes. Samantha coiled back her hair and hid it within a wimple veil hood. When they strolled into the small village, trailing their goats behind them, their feet sank into the mud of the main thoroughfare. Only a small scattering of buildings lined the roadway. A town barely eking out its existence near the edges of the dark forest lands. Aaron kept his head down, choosing not to make eye contact with anyone who would witness them. Samantha noticed. Later that afternoon, Wimarc found someone willing to barter the goats and some other supplies for horses at a livery.
This should help you do the work exactly as you need it.
Ah, indeed. Yes. A fair trade, if I do say. My thanks.
Meanwhile, Samantha and Aaron were walking back down the road, returning from a market stall. Samantha tore off a piece of newly purchased bread and handed it to Aaron, noting he was refusing to look at anyone.
You know, my father said we need to blend in. But you look like a guilty thief. Eyes unblinking, chin down. You want to look invisible, but you are anything but that.
Aaron slowly lifted his gaze, taking in the faces of the strangers passing by. It seemed many didn't even notice him, or care. Maybe a glance or two from a few of them, as he and Samantha were strangers, but nothing that suggested a hint of prejudice.
Perhaps it is their darkness that shrouds the souls of those who we would be hearing from in the West.
You and Mother were always the better in that task. It would not be for me to say. But it is unusual.
Indeed, it was turning out that those priests and acolytes from the Western school that had perished were not getting through to the master guides and other members back home. It was as if their spirits were somehow being held captive in darkness, unable to connect to their living brethren, including those who were at master guide status when it came to spirit communication. Golda, though not a master guide herself, was one of the compound's lead instructors. Aaron himself was also incredibly proficient. The true master guide was Master Morrigan, who wore the blue robe out of the 7 of the high leaders. That none of them were making adequate connection with the Muein deceased was like nothing any of them had experienced before. Aaron remained quiet, perplexed, praying for some voice to mingle with his own during those times of meditation. He and Samantha met Wimarc, who was now towing 3 horses, their packs already saddled.
You have the provisions.
Yes, right here.
Then we continue on our way.
They mounted the steeds and trundled through the town. Aaron spent much of the afternoon on the lonely road through the advancing countryside, attempting to meditate and make mind-to-mind contact with Rachel. Wimarc gave Samantha a compassionate look, feeling for him. Aaron came out of the trance, shaking his head in resignation.
Nothing still. Has this ever happened before?
At times, the veil can become very thick, to where it seems all the stars have been snuffed out. But like all storms, the clouds eventually do part and the sun again shines through.
I have experienced this in the hours of a day, but not so many days turning into weeks.
Who's to say? We must have faith.
Has Thea shown you anything more?
Only the rooftops of small villages and castle towers.
Speaking of castle towers, the Louvre Palace was the epitome of the French king Charles V. Stone walls, towers, and battlements conveyed both strength and security. It was adorned with intricate Gothic elements, including pointed arches and detailed carvings. Large, narrow windows with decorative tracery allowed light to filter into the interior while maintaining a sense of fortification. Surrounding the palace was a fortified courtyard and gardens, creating a blend of utility and beauty in the royal residence. It was in one of the king's private rooms that Pasquier was in audience with the sovereign, despite that pesky cardinal bishop's demand. Charles was only 28 years old, his eyes sharp with a long, pointy nose. He stood quite reserved, looking out a slit window to the sky beyond.
It is an assurance with the Lord's graces that you must continue in the siege.
Your Excellency, such assurance has not been granted in previous skirmishes.
No, of course not. But that is only because the lessons the English have yet to learn require for them a bit more sacrifice. Being a father, you know some children need scrapes and bruises in order to morally and spiritually advance. For God, you are the only king capable of schooling the English from their ways.
They have even refused to listen to God and turned their backs on Him, haven't they?
Pasquier nodded in the affirmative.
I will have to raise more taxes.
No. Allow your constable, Duguay-Clos, to do what he does best. Just keep him from doing it to the towns loyal to you.
Charles stared at him, understanding his meaning. He knew Duguay-Clos had a way of gathering money from the citizens, sometimes in a bit of an overbearing manner. Nonetheless, he never returned empty-handed. King Charles and Pasquier entered the throne room from the small door of the antechamber. Courtiers and guards snapped to attention as Charles took his seat. Meanwhile, Pasquier strode past the entourage and disappeared out of the high chamber.
He even waddles like a pig.
Pasquier left the walls of the Louvre Palace, climbing into an enclosed carriage. Soon, he was whisked away through the streets of Paris, moving out of the city and into the magnificent, glorious, and beautiful countryside. At the end of a long private road, he found himself at the entry to his princely villa, given to him by the king. It was an extravagant blend of Gothic and Romanesque architectural styles. There were carved stone facades, ornate window tracery, along with a couple decorative gargoyles. Tall, steeply pitched roofs were embellished with finials shaped like leaves. Servants stood at attention while one helped Pasquier out of the carriage. He stopped just outside the main door, where a butler waited.
Your Eminence, your guest has already arrived.
Pasquier smiled, nodded, then strutted inside. Renier admired the artwork plastering the walls of the massive drawing room. The paintings were stunning, the finest he had ever seen. Plus, they all appeared to be framed in pure gold. He leaned forward to scratch one of the borders to find out, but pulled back as Pasquier hurried in. Renier faced him, smiled, then glanced at him sideways, as if sizing him up, with a look that suggested he was asking the question, "Is it really him?" They met in embrace and kissed each other on the cheek.
Where's Angeline?
Occupied at the palace. Pierre Roger de Beaufort will succeed over Urban, whether he wishes to or not.
He moved to a small table and poured a drink.
He'll make right with the old geezer failed.
Renier took the drink and downed it, while Pasquier poured one for himself.
As I'm sure you will make right, little brother.
Pasquier eyed him, expecting perhaps a wince at the slight sting he just gave him. It didn't happen.
They aren't like normal people, as you know. I mean, we always thought Father's stories about the one he had encountered during the crusade with Duke Arale were fantastic. But how much of it did we really believe?
Did you not believe all of it? After yours and our own experiences? For shame.
They are not normal.
And neither are we.
You're right.
He strutted to a fancy jewelry box sitting prominently on a table.
I've brought you a gift. Open it. A finger to help point the way.
Pasquier's eyes burst wide as he opened the container.
Or rather many, it seems.
Indeed, the box was filled to the brim with chopped fingers. It was at once ghastly, yet also echoed the power at which Renier commanded over his men. Renier closed the lid, his gaze afire with excitement.
I can hold on to any one of those and learn things about the person it belonged to. For instance, what other pagan mystery schools they might have attended.
He led his cardinal brother to a large map already splayed open on a massive table. He pointed to northern Spain along the coast, the top of Scandinavia, southern Africa, then the French Alps.
Here, 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 and here. Now these two are far too remote. But this one? Been at our gate the whole time.
Pasquier planted a wet kiss on Renier's forehead.
No. God graces you once more.
It's far different terrain. Our assault would have to be much different than the last. And with our lessons learned.
I've convinced the king to keep most forces occupied in the west. I will tell Duguay Claw that there's rumor of an English march through the mountain passes here, and make sure you command the attack.
Companies have already been dispatched in that direction. But we could use additional help on the eastern flank.
Pasquier paused, considering the options, then smiled.
Heathens have a way of igniting a soldier's fury.
He returned to the box.
A most wonderful gift. Thank you for the many directions they may point.
Wimarc guided Aaron and Samantha into the heart of a village square. It wasn't a small town, but also not a gigantic capital city either. The buildings were timber frame, some with thatched roofs, while others were tiled. Narrow cobblestone streets winded through the municipality, with shops selling textiles, pottery, and food along the route.
Many during the start of their pilgrimage of service stay here. It will be good for the night.
They hitched their horses at the rear of an inn and dismounted. As they rounded the street to the establishment's entrance, Aaron spotted a couple sitting on a public bench outside another business. The female looked distressed as her male companion buckled from a cot. It erupted a sinister flashback to the plague of Eloan's experience. Aaron immediately positioned himself in front of Samantha, shielding her against the possibility of contagion. She grinned, admiring his chivalry. Aaron then noticed the tavern across the street, already accepting a flood of patrons in and out. It left him with a deep sense of unease. The foyer of the inn was already hosting several visitors. Food and drink was freely passed around. Aaron noted how many wore clothes that were threadbare, hair grimy and unkempt, and with a sense of mental blinders on behind their eyes. Samantha, too, gave everyone a glance, though it did not worry her in the slightest of how poorly the others were. For Aaron, it was like a rock in the gut. He knew it connected back to what his incarnation as Eloan had to endure. Fortunately, Wimarc's sudden interruption severed the obsession drowning his spirit.
They have a room.
He led them through a small gathering of folk, down a narrow hallway toward the rear of the building. The town grew louder as day turned to dusk, then completely boisterous as night fell and revelry spilled into the street. Aaron opened his eyes, seated in meditation sleep. The room was dark, with shades of warm orange coming in from the outside street lanterns, giving him the ability to see Wimarc seated silently in meditation sleep across from him. It also revealed Samantha was gone. Aaron felt the space beside him where she had sat. He hesitated, looking at Wimarc, then gingerly escaped the room. Aaron proceeded to the inn's main room. He saw people eating, drinking, socializing, but no sign of Samantha. The cheers rolling in from the tavern across the street captured him, telling him that's where she had gone. It made his blood course quicker, feverish, his heart starting to pound. Despite the fear, his Muein training suddenly took over and he hurried to rescue her. A drunken crowd stood behind Samantha, watching with rapture as she was seated at a table playing thimble rig with one of the tavern's usual con artists. The game was simple. A single peppercorn was placed underneath one of the 3 thimbles, which the gamekeeper then slid the thimbles around, hoping you would lose track of where the peppercorn landed. It seemed Samantha had outdone him again as she handed off coins to the patrons behind her.
Here! Go buy more drinks for yourself.
The gamekeeper was old, grisly, with deep lines etched into his skin. His hair, a mix of gray and unkempt black, hung in disheveled strands, framing a face marked by both laughter and hardship. He wore a leather apron that was stained from spills and food remnants. His eyes, sharp and keen, quickly met with a few of the people standing behind her. Samantha didn't notice the glance. Instead, she was focused on keeping the game going.
Your part of the bet is that you hope your talking and the other noise of this place distracts the player enough that his eyes lose track of where it goes.
When Aaron entered, he recognized the sound of her voice as she declared,
Even better if the player is drunk.
Aaron shuffled into the crowd, gently pushing a larger gentleman dressed in a cloak aside. That stranger was Pierre, this time keeping his dagger hidden within the cape.
My pardon.
Pierre glared at him, side-eyed.
Get this wench the deepest mud of mead we've got.
Let's do this better than if I was drunk.
Just what in heaven's name would that be, little lady?
Who here has a blindfold?
Several in the audience nearly fell over each other to find one. Aaron suddenly knelt at Samantha's ear.
Oh, husband. How wonderful you found me.
Bet she knows where he keeps his balls.
I don't think this is a good idea.
I'm just having some fun. Besides, I'm not keeping any of the winnings. It's going to all these good people.
Aaron took her by the shoulder, as if he were going to pull her from the seat.
My apologies, good sir. I'm afraid my wife has already had too much to drink.
Well, not a sip of mead she'd taken yet, buddy. Step back.
A publican offered a blindfold. Samantha grinned and allowed the person to put it over her eyes.
But I'm afraid we have nothing to offer if she loses.
Should have thought of that before you lost sight of her. Now her arse is in that chair, and she's making the bets.
It's not ladylike, I know.
I'm sure we can come to some sort of compensation if she loses.
Even blindfolded, and without anyone noticing, Samantha took Aaron's hand as if she were looking right at it. He noticed, then remembered how she was the teacher of combat arts while being blinded.
I can do this. I promise. Then we can go home.
Aaron reluctantly retreated.
Before you start, let me hold the peppercorn for a moment.
The gamer put the small nugget in her palm. She cradled it briefly, feeling its texture, its energies, then handed it back.
Here. Now you put it under your thimble.
The whole challenge captured Pierre's attention. He elbowed a fellow warrior standing next to him. The gamer put the peppercorn under a thimble. He smiled at the audience, showing a few teeth broken off at the gums, then slid the trio of thimbles all around. Even he wasn't paying attention to where they were going. He was clearly fascinated in watching Samantha. She just sat there, peaceful, her breathing calm and measured.
Round and round it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. Round and round it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. Even I'm not paying attention to where it is. Round and round.
Samantha smiled and joined into the chorus herself.
Nobody knows.
Aaron nervously participated, hoping not to look too out of place.
Nobody knows.
The gamer stopped the shuffle.
Where it stops, nobody knows.
Everyone watched with bated breath. Samantha placed her hand on the edge of the table and slowly slid it along the track before the thimbles. Pierre and his comrade grew even more curious at this display. Aaron, too. Samantha stopped, the thimble on the far left.
There.
The gamer slowly lifted the thimble. Samantha removed the blindfold, grinning ear to ear.
Oh, Mary above it.
Money quickly exchanged hands. Aaron pulled Samantha from the seat.
Very well done. Very.
The gamer motioned to a few men in the crowd, the ones he had glanced at earlier. They suddenly arrested Aaron and nabbed Samantha. The rest of the crowd shrank to their tables. Pierre and his comrade fell back into a corner booth, disappearing in the shadows.
She can't leave just yet. I demand some sort of restitution for the money she's lost me.
Is that not the risk you take with games of chance?
With your sleight of hand, you'll earn it all back tomorrow.
The gamer nestled close to her. His goons held her steady as he ran his leathery hand over her cheek, and then into her head veil.
But I have better plans for tonight, darling.
He gave Aaron a piercing look.
The risk you take with games of chance, my friend.
A goon slid the blindfold back over Samantha's eyes. She didn't resist. The gamer headed for the back rooms, motioning for his men to bring Samantha along. Unfortunately, they couldn't move her. They tugged at her arms, yet it seemed she was rooted securely to the floor. Aaron recognized her poise, then took stock of the tavern, counting heads and sizing up audience members. He didn't like combat. It wasn't his thing, but nevertheless, he was trained.
Yes. Unfortunately, such games are a risk.
With that, Samantha's legs darted forward and pushed off the game table, sending the goons holding her backward onto the floor. At the same time, Aaron backheaded the brute holding him from behind, sending him reeling. Then quickly kicked off an assailant, hoping to tackle him. Samantha, still blindfolded, backflipped from the duo who had held her. The men were back on their feet, throwing punches and trying to nab her, and she easily outmaneuvered them every time. It was positively amazing to witness. She ducked, parried, then jumped in a roundhouse kick, all while wearing a black cloth over her eyes. Pierre kept his companion in the shadows. He wanted to keep watching to learn more. Meanwhile, a patron tried hitting Aaron with a plate. Aaron blocked, then hit the attacker in a sensitive abdominal point, sending him colliding with the floor. He then leapt up, his feet easily clearing the height of the bar, and snatched the club the bartender had procured to fend off the fight. Without looking, he swung, missing an attacker's hand, but precisely knocking away the dagger he had ready to stab him with. Then Aaron tossed the club into the air, where it twirled, came back down, to which he caught and then slammed the butt end of it into the goon's gut. Another patron nabbed a pike spear from the dual display on the wall and advanced towards Samantha. Still blindfolded, she blocked, then managed to take the spear for herself. Another publican came at her, brandishing the other pike lance. It didn't matter. She expertly blocked and parried each of his moves. Meanwhile, Aaron slid between another man's legs, coming up behind him and knocking him out cold to the floor. At the same time, the attacker with the spear stapled the javelin into the floor, hoping to have stabbed Samantha's foot with it. She expertly moved it aside at the last possible second, unlike her student from months earlier. Then she backflipped, landing onto a table, surprising the patrons sitting there. She quickly grabbed their mugs and hurled them at the assailant's head, knocking him cold. Another man yanked a dagger and rushed for her. Samantha leapt from the table, slid across the floor to meet him, and crushed the man's groin with her fist. Aaron ran up beside her. She recognized the sound of his steps, giving him a grin.
I think it's time to go.
Way too much of a good time.
A dagger zipped through the air for the back of her head. Samantha instinctively turned and caught it. She ripped off the blindfold to see it came from Pierre, who was now standing from the edge of his booth. The look in his eyes, the feeling of his energy. Samantha hurled the weapon back at him, stapling the floor centimeters from his toe. Her own eyes burned with the challenge one might see in a Roman warrior. Aaron grabbed her hand and yanked her from the tavern. Pierre and his companion watched after them, while the rest of the crowd stared in dumbfounded astonishment.
This way!
They hurried around several buildings, coming to hide in a narrow alley. Pumped with adrenaline, Samantha tackled Aaron against the wall.
We make a good team.
She smothered him in a passionate kiss. Pierre and his 4 companions galloped onto the grounds of a manor's field. Here, several tents were perched, the temporary camp for Renier's field operatives. Pierre dismounted and marched with purpose, entering one of the larger pavilions. There, he met Philip, Renier's second in command. After telling him what he had witnessed in the tavern,
"Scout every path in and out of the village with haste. Follow, but do not engage. Learn what you can. Orders will come from our Lord once he arrives in from Paris."
If all roads are to have eyes, then I will need a few more men.
Take the Gascons. Just keep them under heel, at least temporarily.
With pleasure.
perhaps it was the adrenaline. Perhaps it was the fact they were completely free from the Muein compound. At any rate, Aaron and Samantha discarded their clothes and made love on a stack of discarded wooden pallets within the scattered moonlight streaming into the narrow alley. Later, they kept themselves to the edges of the buildings, sneaking back toward the coach inn. As they rounded a corner to the next edifice, they found Wimarc casually leaning against the wall, waiting for them. Aaron and Samantha stopped, hand in hand, lost for words.
What do you think your mother would say? Both of your mothers. Well, I, for one, am grateful you finally went through with it. But we need have talk about this fight in the tavern. The inn will be the first place they come looking.
A bit stupefied, they both followed him. They stopped at another alley, where Wimarc handed them their knapsacks, already packed and ready to go.
Like I said, you have yet to learn humility, daughter.
What makes you think I started it?
Wimarc and Aaron gave her a sardonic look.
Men.
Wearing hooded cloaks, the trio gingerly routed their horses away from the inn. They sneaked through fields, moving toward another segment of thick, dark forest. They failed to see a rider stop his steed and watch from a distance. Next time.
My husband is a master apprentice. Samantha and Aaron, guardians. Their tracks will be hidden.
Their knowledge and skills will serve them. It is their selfish attachments that do not, and to which I fear may put us all at grave risk.
Let me out of this bed.
We cannot let you go without thorough examination.
She's at a place that cloisters women. Felt like a religious institution.
That's where they will stop for the night. Take 5. Settle in the village.
Ah! Oh my God!
In much the same way that the overhead clouds have obscured the sun's light, there is also a cloud that darkens our ability to look in and listen to this army gathered in the valley.
It is perhaps how the Western School was able to be breached.
What about us? Could they be seeing and hearing us right now?
Without us even knowing it.